As the west of the east and east of the west, Turkey has always straddled Europe and Asia, joined by Istanbul's towering bridges across the Bosphorus. In recent years, this only Muslim member of NATO and candidate member of the European Union was regarded as a linchpin of stability in a Middle East in meltdown. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, for more than a decade Prime Minister of a pragmatic government with its roots in political Islam and now Turkey's president, was seen in the West as the safest available pair of hands in an unforgiving region. President Barack Obama, until 2 years ago, phoned him regularly for advice. That all seems a long time ago. Ankara's failure to throw its full weight behind the US-led coalition fighting the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or ISIS, the jihadi menace lapping at Turkey's southern borders with Syria and Iraq, has soured relations with the US and the West. Turkey's activist policy towards the so-called Arab Spring upheavals initially won it friends and plaudits, but its increasingly Islamist tone over the past 2 years has set it at odds with neighbors including Egypt, Iraq, Syria, and to an extent Saudi Arabia. Not just President Erdogan's reputation, but Turkey's has suffered in consequence. Meanwhile, Turkey's negotiations on EU membership have been stalled for years. Erdogan's Turkey sometimes has the feel of a country slipping from the ragged edges of Europe into the maelstrom of the Middle East.
Indeed, Turkey drifted away from Europe, especially since 2007, as a result of two dynamics. One that relates to Europe, namely the EU has not really been able to embrace Turkey wholeheartedly. On the contrary, there were ever-growing signs of barriers to Turkey's EU path. And on the Turkish side as well, there has been a backtracking on democratic standards. But even if we maintain that the best option for Turkey and the EU is Turkey's accession, we have to accept that today's political backdrop, neither in Turkey nor in Europe, is favorable for a fast-tracking of accession. And therefore, we have to devise another layer of cooperation which will include all of these policy areas. And I see some intention in Ankara to go in that direction.
But Erdogan's centralization of power over making laws and the interpretation of the law, along with his evident admiration for authoritarian leaders at loggerheads with the West, like President Vladimir Putin of Russia, is making Turkey ineligible anyway.
I certainly hope that this trend is reversible. Otherwise, it would be a very sad end, a very sad conclusion to this idea of a conservative democracy in the Muslim world. Here's the trick. Erdogan and company argue that they are successful because they are authoritarian. And no one has yet made the claim that they are successful despite their authoritarianism, that it is possible to be this successful without giving into illiberal tactics. So liberals in Turkey, liberals in Europe have to demonstrate that there are other ways of being successful. This needs to be done not just in words, but also in deeds.
It mustn't be forgotten that President Erdogan has won 10 elections in a row over the past dozen years. His supporters feel he has earned the right to govern in the way he does.
I think there's a great progress towards a better democracy, more freedom, and it's needless to talk about the development of infrastructural progress, railroads, highways, factories, hospitals, all around Turkey. So that brings the majority of people who elected Erdogan a chance for access to better resources in government services and more equal basis. I think that gives him the legitimacy.
So where will this struggle for Turkey's identity settle?
Turkey is very polarized, and it's a fractured society on cultural lines. And religious conservatives, which were oppressed by the secular elite for decades, really, with bans on headscarf and other examples, came to power with Erdogan. That's fine. They could have realized a grand reconciliation. I think President Gül, former President Gül, had the guts to do that, had the intention to do that reconciliation. But instead of reconciliation, it turned into a payback and an elite transformation, as they call it, transform society. And then that brings reactions to that. And that's why Turkish politics is looking like a war zone today. And Erdogan thinks that if he has enough power, he will win everything. But I think he should start to think how to win the peace rather than winning every battle that he faces.
But Turkey is full of competing narratives. Almost 2 years ago, much of urban and coastal Turkey erupted into civic rebellion at what many Turks felt was the Erdogan government's attempt to homogenize their extraordinary diversity. That was a very European revolt, and opinion polls are now showing a definite uptick in Turkish interest in Europe. Hardly surprising, given the mayhem to Turkey's south and east. President Erdogan is not going to find it easy to get his own way. David Gardner, Financial Times, Istanbul.